Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video we got some Demon Hunter Legendaries to take a look at. This is the first time we're seeing some new Legendaries for Demon Hunters, where the spec of tank has been super dominant in Shadowlands. However, Havoc sometimes have seen some decent play, but generally it's not as strong as Windwalkers or Unholy DKs in terms of bringing melee to raids and even sometimes Mythic Pluses. But we also got updates to the Paladins as well as some other Legendaries. We have testable Necrolord Legendary, Venthyr Legendary that hasn't been testable yet, but we've seen some updates to it. Night Fae, still nothing about them, but the Kyrian Legendary for Paladins is actually looking so strong, it could potentially be the best Legendary for all specs of Paladins. So I want to take a look at all these updates and kind of discuss them in today's video. We'll first start off with a covenant that a lot of Vengeance Demon Hunters are aware of, the Kyrian Covenant, and the Legendary of Blind Faith. Elysian Decree, the Kyrian ability, will shatter 2 additional Lesser Souls when it hits the enemy, and will grant you the buff of Blind Faith for 20 seconds. For each Lesser Soul fragment you consume while Blind Faith is active, you gain 1% Mastery and 10 Fury. How good is this Lego? It sounds actually kind of cool at first, especially in playstyles where Demon Hunters can regularly generate soul fragments. That could be quite a lot of Fury, 10 Fury per soul fragment, especially if you could generate a lot of them. Mastery could also be good, but we also got to take a look at the Havoc and Vengeance specs in terms of, is Mastery a good stat for you to begin with? From my testing on the Havoc Demon Hunter, I found it's kind of okay for DPS, but you just don't generate enough souls. Maybe with Demonic Appetite you might get super lucky and generate a bunch of fragments while the buff of Blind Faith is on you, and you can gain a lot of Fury as well as quite a bit of Mastery. But also, Mastery isn't a great stat for you. It can be, since there are some playstyles that are Chaos involved, and Mastery increases your Chaos damage, but generally in most guides, Mastery isn't a stat that's recommended. Versatility, Critical Strike, even Haste generally perform better than Mastery. Mastery in large doses can be good for Demon Hunters if you can just get a lot of it. It's not a great stat, but even specs with terrible Mastery, getting a lot of Mastery can still be a damage increase. However, as Havoc Demon Hunter, and maybe we just need a more geared Havoc Demon Hunter that can generate more resources and get more Chaos Strikes in, with the Hungering Appetite talent, I wasn't really able to generate more than, I don't know, 5, 6, 7% extra Mastery during the short window of Blind Faith. However, it's a whole different story for your tank Demon Hunters. You regularly generate soul fragments, so you are actually going to get some value of this. That's extra Fury, which can be used to make yourself tankier or to do more damage to enemies. Mastery, while not an amazing stat, does increase your attack power, which does increase your damage, but also does at least give you some survivability options. Tank Demon Hunters generally don't stack Mastery, but it can be used inside of your mitigation windows in order to make you even tankier. Hard to tell if this is going to be the Legendary to replace the current running Legos for tanks and Demon Hunter DPS. At least for tanks I see some value, for DPS I don't really see that much value, to be honest. Next we have the Necrolord Demon Hunter Legendary. Not the most popular covenant, but we still want to take a look at it. Demonic Oath. When Fodder to the Flame Demon explodes, it inflicts Firebrand to 5 nearby enemies for 5 seconds. Additionally, Shattered Soul's duration is increased by 8 seconds. So this obviously has a tank benefit, but let's first start with the DPS. This means that you do get the benefit of Firebrand every time your Fodder to the Flame explodes. You do more damage if it's more enemies, but only up to a cap of 5. So on a single target situation, you're not seeing huge amounts of extra damage. It does technically give you a longer Shattered Soul duration, but that part only sometimes works for me for PTR and others doesn't, so it's okay in that department. I just don't really know like how strong this Lego is going to be. I don't think it's going to be better than the current single target Legendaries Demon Hunters have, or the question I guess is, can it compete against the other AoE options that Demon Hunters have? For Vengeance it's a little different. Necrolord Covenant isn't super popular like Kyrian, but there are Demon Hunters that are playing it and are able to push keys. Not quite the 27s that Kyrian are doing, but 24s, which is actually pretty good. The defensive benefit of applying Brand on enemies does also synergize into the Brand-centric playstyle the Demon Hunters are playing currently, especially when they're pushing higher keys. Eventually enemies just start slapping you really hard, so prolonging the duration of Brand does give you a little bit more tankiness whenever you don't have spikes up. and this legendary does proc brand on enemies, and you are able to prolong the duration of brand. So it somewhat synergizes, but the RNG nature of the actual ability of Fodder to the Flame, I don't really know if it's worth making the legendary that good or the playstyle that much better. It's technically an option, and there are synergies is what I'm trying to say, but will that synergy be enough to make it a playable legendary? We'll have to find out until Demon Hunter tanks pick this thing up and try it in dungeons, maybe once Tezavesh dungeon is available, but definitely is an interesting option for Vengeance, not so much for Havoc. Then we have the Venthyr legendary. The Venthyr legendary is called Agony Gaze. Sinful Brand does 10% increased damage, and Eye Beam and Fell Devastation based on your spec increase the duration of Sinful Brand by half a second. The abilities of Eye Beam and Fell Devastation are a bunch of small hits, so when you Eye Beam, it's not one massive Eye Beam, it's a bunch of little hits of Eye Beam, which every one of those little hits helps prolong the duration of Sinful Brand, which by itself does quite a bit of damage on a minute cooldown. I actually really like this Lego, and I think it fits the Vengeance Demon Hunter playstyle super well. You're able to metamorphosis on top of enemies and then blast them with the Eye Beam, doing a ton of damage. Even on single target, and my Demon Hunter isn't super geared, I was able to do quite a bit of damage with Sinful Brand, and if you're a little bit clever about lining up Eye Beams, you can have quite a long duration. So this could potentially in the future, on paper, be this big nuke legendary that lets you just have your Sinful Brand be quite a substantial amount of your damage. But that's only on paper. I feel like this legendary has opportunity to do well, but it will live and die in the sims. If people sim it and it becomes a pretty decent damage option for AoE and single target, maybe something to use for mythic pluses, then people will play it. If it's not better sim-wise than some of the other options, I don't really know if people will. For Vengeance Demon Hunters, it technically does have a defensive benefit. It does debuff the enemy where they swing, auto attacks at you slower, and cast spells at you slower, so it does have a defensive benefit, but I feel like it's such an aggressive legendary that will make you want to press Metamorphosis to debuff everybody, then breathe Fell Devastation on them. Maybe the best defense is a good offense, so maybe that's what this legendary is trying to get you to do as a Venthyr Vengeance Demon Hunter. Although with how many Demon Hunters are running like defensive legendaries for keys, especially as they're pushing, it might just play counter into what the meta is. We'll have to wait and see. I feel like this is such a really good aggressive legendary, but the defensive benefits, I don't really know. I don't know if they're better than the other options. Finally, we have the one that I can't test, but it's going to be Blazing Slaughter. Still, to this day, Blizzard will not me change back to Night Fae, and they really need to do something about it for PTR. Because a lot of players are changing covenants regularly, and just being locked out and not being able to actually test one just sucks. But Blazing Slaughter, the hunt engulfs you with Immolation Aura. Upon reaching your target, you gain 3% agility for 12 seconds for each enemy hit. This one on paper doesn't seem bad, but it seems very AoE focused. The extra Immolation Aura could be good for single target damage for Havoc with a specific legendary, but you're already running this legendary instead of that one, so you kind of lose it on the value. For Vengeance, Immolation Aura could be good. There are some talents that work off of Immolation Aura. This one seems really good for extra adds. The more of them you hit, like in Mythic Pluses, the more agility you gain, the more damage you do, and the tankier you can become. But in single target, that's 3% extra agility. I don't really know how good that's going to be. The hunt as an ability is generally decent. Both tanks and Vengeance can take advantage of it. It does quite a bit of damage and also does have some healing components to it. I just don't really know if this legendary is that strong. I can't test it, but to me personally, it just doesn't sound that good on paper. Finally, we have some Paladin updates. These legendaries either get changed recently or are now finally testable. First one is going to be Kyrian. The Kyrian legendary reads, after casting Divine Toll, you instantly cast Judgment every 5 seconds. This effect lasts 30 seconds. In its current state, it basically just keeps recasting Divine Toll every 5 seconds, which actually extends the cooldown of Divine Toll down to a minute 30. We're not sure it's supposed to do that. We're also not sure if it's actually supposed to cast Divine Toll. It says it casts a Judgment for Retribution Paladin, but it casts a Divine Toll version of Judgment, which gains the benefits of a conduit. In PvP, we could see how that could be problematic. But also in PvE, it could be exceptionally strong single target damage, especially if you get into back-to-back procs. But it also could be the case that it's not functioning properly, and we'll know that in the next few weeks. Is it supposed to just randomly cast Judgment at my target, or is it supposed to cast the Divine Toll version of Judgment? Normal Judgment doesn't get conduit buffs. Divine Toll does. Also, the cooldown of this ability, it does transform Divine Toll from a minute cooldown to a minute 30 because it keeps putting it on cooldown over and over. Is it supposed to do that, or is Divine Toll still supposed to be a minute cooldown with just this extra benefit of 30 seconds free ability usages? Either way, it is a lot of extra holy power, lots of extra resources, and if it's supposed to cast the Divine Toll version of Judgment that gains benefits from a conduit, it could be really strong for single target, and not too terrible for AoE. So we'll have to wait and see how this Lego progresses, but it went from like a kind of a decent Lego to, wait, this thing is pretty busted. But after more testing, it's like, I don't think it's working properly. Then we have the Necrolord Paladin Legendary, Duty Bound Gavel, which gives you an extra charge of Vanquish's Hammer. And every time you use the buff from Vanquish's Hammer, you get an extra value ability, usually in the form of an AoE extra ability with your single target use. So as a rate, you'll Tempest Verdict and you'll get 2 Divine Storms instead of 1 Divine Storm. And at first I was like, you know what, the Covenant ability itself for Necrolords isn't all that strong, but with this legendary, after they're actually testing it, it's really not terrible. I thought this would be really, really bad, but it's actually really not bad. Divine Storm in itself, an extra 2 Divine Storms instead of just 1, is quite a bit of extra damage. This buff that you get from the actual Gavel does stack up, so you can bank 2 charges and have an easier time incorporating it into your rotation. The Gavel itself is on a 30-second cooldown and does generate holy power. So if you were to compare it with Kyrian, I don't think it's that much better than Kyrian, because if Kyrian gets a bunch of procs with those extra judgments, it's huge. But the Necrolord with this legendary combo doesn't seem too terrible on paper. This one, while really, really cool, I feel like it comes down to Sims if it'll be good at all. But from a couple Paladins that I know, they're actually kind of excited to give this one a try, whether it's on PTR or maybe once this comes out live. It has a lot of potential, especially with Paladins and the way that they're set up, where they're trying to do the most amount of damage during their wings. And if your single target abilities also did big AoE damage on top of your wings damage, it could have some potential. Not saying it'll be best, not saying it'll be good at all, but it could have some real potential to it. Finally, we have the Venthyr Lego that's still not testable, but we did get a pretty big change for it. Ashen Hollow duration is increased by 50% while you're inside of it. However, leaving Ashen Hollow for any reason will cause the effect to end, and that's already a deal breaker for some players. My early read of this legendary, it sounded like Ashen while you stand in it will have a longer duration, but if you leave it, you'll have it cool down, speed up quicker. So you might be able to use Ashen to drop it on a raid team while the Paladin has to go and do a mechanic or so. But the fact that it just disappears just kind of breaks it for some players in terms of wanting to try this legendary out. It's not available, but most people don't really think it's going to be that good. But numbers wise, it could be pretty okay, as Ashen is quite a bit of Paladin damage, and having a 50% longer duration of this ability could be okay in some situations. I think this one will die or live in the Sims, depending on how well it performs. I mean, there's a lot of Holy Paladins that are Venthyr that utilize Ashen as quite a good portion of the damage, together with a conduit for Ashen for even more damage. It could be pretty good in that regard, but the fact that it can remove your Ashen just for leaving, I personally don't like that. We're still yet to see a functional Night Fae Paladin Legendary as of right now, so I'll try to make a video on that whenever that update is available. But it's really cool that we got to see finally some Demon Hunter Legendaries. Even though I don't think any of them are looking super superb, they do have to go through a little bit of work and a little bit of tuning, and we definitely need to see what Blizzard is going to do with the Kyrian Paladin Legendary. But personally, I'm kind of excited for the Venthyr Demon Hunter Lego and the Maldraxian Necrolord Paladin Lego. Those actually seem really cool to me. I don't know if they'll be strong overall in terms of how well they work, but they seem interesting and definitely something I might want to check out in the future. Necrolord Paladin seems a little bit like a paradox, kind of like a Kyrian Death Knight, but I think personally it'll be something cool that I would want to maybe try in the future. But anyway, thank you guys so much for checking out this video. Let me know what you think about these legendary updates in the comments below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.